In today's show, we look at the Play for Today strain of programming, which brought a wealth of new playwrights to the BBC and was once a flagship programme for new talent. We're going to take this opportunity to look at a drama which is available currently on DVD that was groundbreaking and rather eerie, that focused on the clash between modernity and the old ways. This was an hour or so of folk horror that was broadcast in 1970 and indirectly launched a yearly tradition that lasted well into the late 70s, which became the notorious Ghost Stories for Christmas on the BBC that we used to have to look forward to on frosty nights in December. Oh, did I also forget to mention that the play may have inspired the superlative 1973 folk horror opus, The Wicker Man. So what exactly do we mean by folk horror? Witchfinder General could be classed as such, Blood on Satan's Claw another, and of course The Wicker Man, and Hammer's The Witches from 1967. Even in children's programmes such as Children of the Stones had a stab at what could be described as a representation of something primeval. Something sinister, something otherworldly, yet highly spiritual, affecting the modern way of life, and is only revealed to a select community or a selected individual, bringing peril to the persons who stumble across it. Folk horror, I also believe, is not entirely relegated to the supernatural, and arguably something like the film Straw Dogs could be classed in this genre also. There is no actual definition, but in all cases, folk horror in the majority of cinema focuses on ancient traditions and energies that are let loose in a modern-day setting, or is set in history where the beliefs of the times are affected by the belief system of the United Kingdom's pagan roots and traditions that gone before it. With these movies, we must also focus on tone, as in all cases, there is a scenario of the bucolic, almost idyllic way of life, the sort you would find in the paintings of Constable or Jean-François Millet, and where on closer inspection there is a dark and sinister vein running through what appears to be the ordinary and is only revealed on closer inspection. The evil itself in folk horror only seems to affect certain selected communities and woe betide any outsider who affects the equilibrium by stumbling or being completely unaware that fate has mapped out their destiny for them unknowingly. Sometimes the maleficent is brought to the community from the outside, and the maleficent can even be personified by an individual themselves, as in Matthew Hopkins in The Witchfinder General, or as in Lord Cumberland in The Mark of the Devil. Folk horror usually takes place in the countryside, the English countryside that we refer to here, which is a wide enough space and a total foreign landscape to any city dweller to get lost in. Another aspect I have known about folk horror is quite simply how chilling it is. Even some of the tales that are set in the summer still have a coolness about them to enhance the frisson, and has a feeling and lighting not too dissimilar to the sort you would find early autumn, late winter, or early spring. Whether this is a deliberate staple of the directors, I am unsure, or whether, due to the folk horror element, it is something we, as a spectator, tune into. Folk horror is damp, crepuscular, fetid, claustrophobic and absorbing, Done well, as in The Wicker Man or in Robin Redbreast, such gems seem to stir up in us the wonders of paganism, our heritage, our roots, and the mystery of the occult and witchcraft, where we forgo science for the more sidereal and the high class for heathen. In the play Robin Redbreast, and as we have seen in The Wicker Man, Robin Redbreast focuses on the folk horror tale of an unsuspecting individual coming across a community to escape the rat race, only to find they play an important part in the customs, traditions, and unsavoury goings-on in an isolated community of where they seek bucolic idealism, only to find it a primitive nightmare. A place where all the mod-cons of technology, the wonder of progress, and the superficialities we are influenced by every day, whether media or other people, has absolutely no place. Robin Redbreast concerns Nora Palmer, played superbly by a 60s-70s BBC drama regular Anna Cropper, a trendy, by early 70s standards, BBC script editor. Nora is jilted by her boyfriend and decides to move to the south of England, leaving her London life behind, but remaining in contact with her best friends Jake and Madge. Nora and her ex bought a cottage in the rural community, and so she decides to live there. Nora arrives and is made welcome by Mrs. Vigo, a housekeeper, Mr. Wellbeloved, a butcher, Mr. Fisher, played with sinister charm by Bernard Hepton, and Peter, a wood chopper. Nora is perturbed by strange noises she hears in the cavities in the old house and deduces it must be mice. The villagers recommend her to Rob, who is an exterminator, to clear the problem. Her first meeting with him proves to be rather odd, as she stumbled across Rob in the woods where he's practicing karate, almost sky-clad in the forest. Although referred to as Rob, she discovers Rob is in fact called Edgar. Nora forms a bond with Edgar, and although they have little in the way of shared interests, Nora finds Edgar rather alluring. After Edgar helps Nora clear the dwelling of mice, she decides to call on his services again after someone drops a robin down the chimney breast, of which he kills. After the event, Nora gets rather sexy, and as the time is right, she decides to sleep with Edgar, but has mislaid her diaphragm and therefore is unprotected. Nora finds out she is pregnant and decides to hoof it back to London so she can have a termination, but at the 11th hour decides she wants to keep the child and returns back to the village. As Easter time edges nearer, Nora finds strange things are happening. Nora begins to think she is deliberately being cut off from the outside world, and that there is a conspiracy to keep her in the village. She finds her car has been rendered unusable. The phone lines have been cut, and the local bus driver refuses to stop for her, and she finds herself being returned back to the village, despite her attempts to flee from it. Nora then believes that the village may have an idea to sacrifice her as well as stealing her child. Could this be inexplicably linked to the cycle of the seasons? Despite their initial eccentric charms, Nora's view of the locals begins to darken, and the only person she can confide in and seek solace with is Edgar. With her trust in everyone around her flatlined, Nora lets Edgar into the house. At near hysteria point, the villagers rally to the cottage where Nora and Edgar are trapped inside. Finally they enter, and to Nora's surprise and horror, they leave her untouched, but take Edgar away to his sacrifice. It is explained by the historian Mr. Fisher that Edgar was nicknamed Rob after Robin Redbreast, and his sacrifice is in keeping with the rural and traditional belief of the villagers. Rob was raised from birth by the townsfolk with the whole purpose of a preordained sacrifice. Mr. Fisher informs Nora that the child she carries is going to be the next Robin Redbreast. Fisher asks Nora if she wanted to return back to the city, then he and the community will raise a child for her. Nora flatly refuses, but is allowed to abscond. In the creepy ending, Nora gives one last look at the 4 main villagers she has been in contact with all this time in her new life, and sees they have metamorphosed into pagan divinities as she speeds into an uncertain future. It appears Mr. Fisher is the main ancient archetype, as he stands sprouting a pair of antlers synonymous with Kononos, or more familiar to the majority, Herne the Hunter. It has to be said that for 70-odd minutes Robin Redbreast is a fantastic slice of arcane television, in story writing, in direction, in atmosphere, and of course acting. But what is the source of Robin Redbreast? Well, it was written by John Bowen, whose inspiration for this story was allegedly based in a news report on a murder in 1945, where a tramp, Charles Walton, was killed by a group of villagers outside Stratford-upon-Avon, and his bloodied corpse was dragged along in order that the blood could fertilise the crops. Although this has been highly debated, and probably indicates that inspiration for this stems more from Sir James Fraser's The Golden Bough, which correlated that most relatively modern populist faiths, like Christianity, all have their roots in paganism. It was also directed by James McTaggart, whose resume features many a production in the Play for Today strand. Robin Redbreast is a perfect example of a play primarily dealing with the clash of a modern society against the rural customs of our ancestors. It also educates us into our dark past, where folklore and sacrifice were second nature to mankind and meant so much to keep a community thriving with its superstitious belief. It means that by understanding the old ways, Nora is made perfectly aware of Rob's destiny before they ended up sleeping together and everything went tits up. Traditionally, it is said to kill a robin is considered to be extremely unlucky, and the hand that does this would shake thereafter. In pagan belief and Celtic tradition, the robin is associated with death. Yule is the time in the pagan calendar that the Oak King triumphs over the Holly King. The Holly King represents darkness and death that has ruled over the darker months and has been in place since October the 31st. At the winter solstice on December the 21st, the Oak King is reborn, bringing in a new era of life and lightness. Another version, which may have influenced Robin Redbreast a little more, has the Wren, who is the little king of the waning year, being killed by Robin Redbreast as the new king of the waxing year, hence Edgar's sacrifice. Not all bad for the Robin though. As well as his association with death, he is also associated with charity, taking beakfuls of water to souls in damnation, and compassion, covering dead bodies with leaves, for example. Good luck as well as bad. And of course fire, yes fire, as other folklore tells us that the redbreast is caused by scorching. This little bird has influenced folklore in many countries, including of how the robin got his red breast, which was due to the blood of Jesus staining his throat and chest when the little bird tried to relieve Christ's suffering when it attempted to remove a thorn from the crown on his head when he was crucified. For we can there again see the correlation and the connection with Robin Redbreast and its fascination with death and rebirth that was echoed in the Wicker Man film 3 years later. Also, this connection with the death and rebirth was explained perfectly by Mr. Fisher when he has a conversation with Nora, as we can see in this clip.
Why are you letting me leave when I could go to the police?
About what, Miss Palmer?
Mrs. Vigo said something rather curious to me this morning. She said, "What good would a woman's blood be for the land?"
No good at all.
It takes a man.
Indeed, yes.
You understand it then?
Study of religions is one of my many interests. I am a reading man, you know.
Known for it.
The goddess of fertility in the old legends was in some ways like yourself, Miss Palmer. Not a married lady, but nevertheless, if you'll excuse the freedom, not a virgin either. In the autumn, she would couple with the young king.
King?
He'd be treated like a king. Served and pampered, you might say. And then, of course,
Killed.
he would pass away, yes. Assisted to it, you might say. And from his blood, the crops would spring.
A Greek legend, Mr. Fisher.
And Egyptian, Mexican, many places. You must read a book by Sir James Fraser, The Golden Bough, in 7 volumes.
But not an English legend.
Robin Hood, Robin of the Dale, even Robin Redbreast, one of the very birds in your garden. The male robin only lives a year, you know. The female has many partners. Always Robin. Such bounty there was, such fruitfulness, Miss Palmer, from the blood that drained from Robin Hood.
Despite all the tales affecting the industrious little fellow, it is a fascination of a robin being the harbinger of death, which is a focal point of this chilling tale. It is believed that, with the exception of New Year's Day, a robin in the house brings with it news of the reaper. And that news is that the reaper is about to visit one of the unlucky occupants, and to kill it results in the perpetrator's death. Poor old Edgar in this tale gets a double whammy as both these instances happen. Such history is woven into this masterful script and ensures Robin Redbreast is fascinating and an engrossing piece of eerie television drama worthy of look, look and look again. We are quite lucky that Robin Redbreast still exists in the archives, considering the purge that occurred, with valuable plays being wiped en masse as per the ludicrous junking policy in the 1970s. Robin Redbreast was broadcast on the 10th of December 1970 and was one of the very first plays broadcast on the BBC that was repeated again 1 year later after a power strike kicked in at the final 20 minutes of its initial broadcast. As a precursor to the more sweeping and cinematic Wicker Man, Robin Redbreast does highlight the calibre of television output at this time from the BBC, and with the exception of dramas in a serial format that we have now, is a unique example of how unnerving a standalone drama can be and were back at the time that they were screened. The DVD that's available, and which I urge you to buy to see this play in its entirety, features this play along with an interview with John Bowen, and is well worth forking out for. And it's also an ideal collection for any horror enthusiasts who would get the DVD and fit it quite snugly alongside the Ghost Stories for Christmas collection, which is also available and will no doubt feature in one of our episodes in the near future.
Please believe me. I don't know who's out there. I'm not one of them.
You're terrified. You're as frightened as I am.